1974, a time of bell-bottom pants and disco music. 14-year-old girl excited over the prospect of meeting her new employer for a summertime job babysitting that she just received. She exited the bus at the spot where she was supposed to meet him, and she was never heard from again. This is the story of Maragret Fox. This is Night Owl. Good day, everyone. I'm Ted, your host, and welcome back to Night Owl. Today, we're going off to Burlington, New Jersey. But before we do, please remember to hit like and subscribe and to share this video, because it really does help our channel out. And you may also want to turn on your notifications just so you'll be kept apprised of all our new videos that we come out with. With that being said, back to our case. As I said, we're going off to Burlington, New Jersey this time. The year is 1974. The music was so vibrant. The fashions was outstanding. And it was such an exciting time to be alive. And no one felt more excited than Maragret Fox, a delightful 14-year-old young girl that came from an incredibly tight-knit family. In fact, her and her siblings weren't as much siblings as they were best friends. Of course, once she turned 14, what happened to her happened to lots of girls. They outgrew their dolls and playhouses, started getting more interested in clothing, makeup, and everything that came with it. The problem is, all her siblings were boys. She just had brothers. She didn't have any close female friends to actually share these interests with, which unfortunately made her feel, awfully alone. Now, she also had another issue. At school, she was picked on pretty substantially. There'd been times she'd come home in tears because of how she'd been treated by some of her classmates, being picked on and the like. In this one instance, a group of them threw a bunch of snowballs at her as soon as she exited the school and followed her part of the way to her house, throwing snowballs the entire time. Yeah, I remember the feeling. Kids can be incredibly cruel at times. Now, in June of 1974, both Marguerite and her younger cousin, who was 11 at the time, Lynn Parks, decided instead of just going off to the beach or messing around during the summer, they'd actually get summertime jobs, make some extra, dinero. So they both took ads out in their local newspaper offering their services as babysitters. And on June 19th, 1974, they did indeed get a response to their ad. Some dude who called himself John Marshall called after seeing the ad in the paper. He claimed that he and his wife needed a babysitter for their 5-year-old son. There was a bit of a problem, though. He actually lived out of town. It was a close enough town to where they lived. It was in Mount Holly. The only problem is that they have to take a bus to get there. Now, the number that the girls had put in the paper actually belonged to Lynn, so it was Lynn that he initially called. But as I always said, she was only 11, so her parents didn't much like the thoughts of her taking the bus by herself. They thought she was a bit young. So that left the opportunity up to Margaret. And her parents was okay with it, and she was completely over the moon. I mean, she thought it was a perfect job for her. It was going to pay $40 a week, which in 1974 money is pretty good money for babysitting, I tell you. She'd have access to the family swimming pool and a chance to earn a bit of independence during the summer. Now, they had some early on issues with trying to arrange a time where they could actually meet for the first time. But eventually, John Marshall set up a meeting with Margaret for the 24th of June, 1974. He said that she'd have to take a bus to town, but then he'd meet her at the bus stop and he'd pick her up in his red Volkswagen Bug. Now, when it comes to Margaret's father, he did talk to John on the phone a few times. But the odd thing is, John never actually provided all that much information about him. No real details of his life, not even his address. Now, me, I'm a little bit different. I would ask the dude a few more questions. You know, small things like where he lived, stuff like that. I'm sort of funny that way when it comes to sending my daughter off to meet some stranger. On the 24th of June, 1874, Margaret woke up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, all excited about the events for the day. Her kid brother, Joe, actually ended up walking her to the bus stop, and he said that she got on the bus at about 8:40, and the bus was heading to Mount Holly. When she boarded the bus, she was wearing a outfit that definitely screamed 1974. A blue floral shorts, bell-bottom jeans, a navy and white checkered jacket that was tied around her waist. She had a gold necklace as well as a bracelet with blue stones. And what she carried with her, she carried a brown backpack with her that had her swimsuit and eyeglass case within it. Now, her parents did ask her to give them a quick ring on the phone as soon as she arrived at John's house. But that phone call never came in. They thought that maybe she just forgot. You know, she is kind of excited. But then 2 p.m. came and went, as did 2:30 p.m. Their concern grew and grew. It's at this point that Margaret's mom decided to call the number that John had provided. After many rings, a woman answered and said no one named John Marshall lived there, which was rather alarming. And then she tried it again, and this time, on the second call, a man answered. And he told her that the number she dialed actually belonged to a payphone. It's at this point, her parents freaked. They knew something was horribly, horribly wrong. And they, of course, naturally, right off the bat, called the cops. Within hours, everyone started searching. Along with the police, they had family and neighbors all searching Mount Holly. A guy named Detective Leonard Ball went out looking in the Mount Holly area and showing Margaret's picture to over 200 people. Now, the next day, the detective decided to ride the same bus that Margaret, took, to retrace her footsteps. Of course, while he was on the bus, he showed everyone Margaret's picture, and there was actually two women that recognized her. They said that she got off at the intersection of High and Mill. And that was exactly where Margaret had been told to exit the bus. One of the women said that she remembered Margaret smiling at the woman's baby when the baby pulled Margaret's hair. Now, both these witnesses were able to describe what Margaret was wearing when she left the house and got onto the bus. And they also described her as being rather petite, with bright blue eyes, and tons of freckles. Now, there was another witness that said she actually got off at the exact same stop that Margaret did, and witnessed Margaret walk over to some dude driving a red vehicle and ask him if he was John Marshall. Now, the cops were able to track the guy down, and according to him, he just said that, no, I'm not John Marshall, and she moved on her way. Now, this guy did drive a red vehicle, but it wasn't a Volkswagen Bug. So he was pretty much cleared. But that is the last confirmed sighting of Maragret Fox. Now, the police were able to track down the phone number that John Marshall had given, and it did indeed come from a payphone. This payphone was actually located at a supermarket in Lumberton, which is a little town beyond Mount Holly. It's at this point the cops realized they weren't just dealing with a lost child here. It was indeed a kidnapping. Now, once Margaret's vanishing hit the news circuit and everyone became aware of what happened, there was tons and tons of reports that came into the cops suggesting that Margaret was not the first call that John Marshall had made. Several parents said that their child had been contacted by someone that tried to lure them away with promises of fake babysitting jobs. But they determined that chances are Margaret was not exactly targeted. She's just the one that said yes to the call. Now, as you can imagine, the FBI jumped in soon after she went missing. Unfortunately, they have never found her or even any trace of Margaret. But the case still remains open to this day. And they did do an intensive investigation. In some cases, asking the public for help, which in cases like this, that could be a lifeline. In fact, in August of 1974, the FBI released a composite sketch of a man they want for questioning. They haven't said if this is, in fact, John Marshall or anything like that. Just someone they want to talk to. Now, at the time, they claimed this person was between the ages of 35 and 40, about 5 feet, 10 inches tall, 200 to 230 pounds. And he allegedly had very blue eyes, light blonde or reddish hair worn in a crew cut, kind of graying in different areas, and he had very noticeable, in fact, incredibly white teeth. Now, you may be wondering where they got this description of the guy. Well, it seemed that the month before Margaret went missing, a guy in a red Volkswagen tried to pick up another girl in Mount Holly. And they think there's probably a connection. This guy also drove a red Volkswagen Bug. Now, of course, the FBI did their own investigation, but the Burlington Police Department did just sit idly by and let the FBI do all the heavy lifting. They themselves ran their own investigation. They interviewed every owner of a red Volkswagen Beetle that they could find. And throughout New Jersey, they checked into pretty much every guy that had the last name Marshall or that was named John Marshall. Now, several of these guys, actually for at least a brief moment, became persons of interest. Now, one of these such guys was actually named John Marshall. And he also worked at the exact same supermarket that they traced the suspect John Marshall's phone number to, which kind of makes him the ideal suspect. Or just incredibly unlucky. But at any rate, I'm not exactly sure how or why, but he allegedly was cleared as well. And of course, they also tried to peg her disappearances on any serial killers that were still functioning in the area, such as like Ted Bundy, I guess, was a suspect for a short bit. But most of them didn't pan out that they either was in prison already at the time of the crime or they were not around in the area at the time of the crime. Now, in 1988, they did actually find human remains belonging to a female. And then in 2005, they tried to use DNA to match those remains to Margaret. I guess they had DNA from one of Margaret's brushes, something like that. But it turned out it was not her. Now, on June 24th, 2019, which marked like the 45th anniversary of Margaret's disappearance, the FBI actually released publicly a clip from a phone call that Margaret's parents received. In this call, the guy's asking for $10,000 in ransom. The FBI released it in hopes that maybe someone could recognize the voice. But I'm gonna play that now, so maybe someone out there that's watching this video may actually recognize his voice. We'll see.
$10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is the butter topping. Who is it?
Well, I'm not exactly sure why they kept that a secret for so long. I mean, something like that, I think they should have released right then and there. But the thing is, what drew a lot of attention to this clip is the phrasing. When he says $10,000 might be a lot of bread, but your daughter's life is a buttered topping. That's not the only time they've heard that. The exact phrase was actually used in a ransom note that her parents had actually received shortly after Margaret's was taken. So they believe that the person who wrote the note and made the phone call was probably the same person. Now, I'm like everyone else. I'm hoping eventually this case is closed and we find out what happened to Margaret. I mean, and I do get that it's over 50 years old. Whoever did it is unlikely to still be alive. Her parents, unfortunately, has already passed away years ago, waiting for the daughter to be returned to him. But her siblings still hold out a candle in hopes that they find out what A, happened to their sister, and B, who did it. I mean, tips, I guess, are still coming in. And that means that these people, 50 years or not, haven't forgotten. And maybe you yourself, sitting out there watching, might have a tip, something you remember, something you had forgotten till this moment. If so, don't keep that to yourself. Call the FBI at 1-973-792-3000. Don't forget, the tip that you bring to light might take an open case and turn it into a solved case. Whatever happened to Maragret Fox? Was her light extinguished by some unknown fiend? Or is she somehow still alive out there, somewhere in the world? The fact is, we just don't know. All we do know is that Margaret was a sweet kid that was taking her first steps into a much bigger world of adulthood when she was snatched away from her future. Her fate, unfortunately, won't be revealed until one way or another she's brought home. But what do you think? Do you think this case will actually ever be solved? I mean, he's over 50 years old. But I suppose it's always possible that someone comes forward with like a deathbed confession and confesses to the crime. But do you think that will actually happen? Or do you think this is just going to go down in history as another mystery that has never been solved? Let me know what you think, or any theories you have, or any comments you got, really. You got any suggestions on cases you want me to cover? I'm always open. Just let me know down in the comments. That's it for today. But before you go, please don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and to share this video. Because I ain't kidding, it really does help us out. And you may also want to turn on your notifications just so you're notified of any new content that we come out with. Thanks for coming by. And remember, be you good or be you wicked, everyone deserves justice. Good night.